he has spoken on the topics faith, family and freedom in Cuba, Belgium, Brazil, Congo, UK and all over the USA to crowds from 14 to 40,000. International leadership speaker, trainer and coach. Author of Learn to Raw Leadership, Attitude Hack, Live a More Excellent Life, 5 Battle Strategies of a Victorious Warrior. 2021 President's Lifetime Achievement Award recipient. Founding partner of the John Maxwell team. Toastmaster International Speech Competition semi-finalist. Founder of Tell It Like It Is TV, ThatGuyRocks.com and ThatGuySpeaks.com. Creator of Story Power TV, Transforming Grace TV, and Leading Leaders Podcast. Producer of 4 TV programs and podcasts for Liftable TV and World Trumpet Television as well as multiple social media channels. Please help me welcome J Loren Norris.
You know, 1,000 times a day, leaders have to communicate with the people they lead. Thousands of times every day. Sometimes through email, sometimes through text message, sometimes face-to-face, sometimes on the job, sometimes in front of the customer. But the most effective way to communicate with the people you lead is directly and through story. And by that I mean, you've got to have a conversation that is relevant to them, that makes sense to them, that's immediately applicable for them, and not just you talking out of your head. These stories, well deployed, they save time, they save money, and in the end, they can save relationships. That's what I want to talk about in this episode of Leading Leaders.
Subscribe now for our extensive video library of leadership promoting faith, family, and freedom.
I'm J Loren Norris with Leading Leaders, and I can tell you the number of times that I've had communication with someone. I've tried to relate to them an idea straight out of a book or straight out of a manual. And sometimes it doesn't really go across well because of a difference of opinion or a difference of experience. Or maybe it's because what's in the manual is so technical, there's no relationship to it as a human. If you're not a robot or a wrench, it doesn't matter to you. It doesn't make any sense to you. Maybe you've never had to work with manuals that technical or dealt with things like auto parts or firefighting where there's a lot of science behind it, but I have. And I can tell you that saving, well, that goes across the board. People stand in line at grocery stores and get upset with each other, get bitter with each other because they don't understand each other, because they have a hard time with each other. And stories, well, stories are the way that we break through those barriers. Stories really do save money and save relationships. Maybe you haven't thought about it in that way. You haven't thought of story as a tool for saving time. How many times have you explained something and 2, 3, 5, 7 minutes in it, you realize what you've been doing the whole time is repeating yourself. You've been saying the same words over and over again, hoping that the second time or the third time or the fourth time that you said the same words, they would make sense this time even though they didn't any else. Well, that's because I think it's the definition of an insanity as we've heard it many times when you do the same thing over and over expecting a different outcome. Well, it's kind of frustrating when you do the same thing over and over and expect a different outcome. You're not getting a different outcome. You're getting the same outcome. That's insanity. Stop doing the same thing. If you're getting the same results, do something different. But telling a story often allows that illustration to bring somebody into the moment through a new lens, to bring them into that moment through a new perspective. And that opportunity for them to see the world through your eyes, to see things a little bit differently, that's the key that you're looking for. Allowing someone to shift their perspective, their viewpoint, their understanding of the words that you're trying to deliver out of your mouth makes a huge difference. I recently finished a fantastic book, 6 Types of Genius, I believe was the name. And it was an incredible book. And one major reason that it was good, the base teaching behind it was really, really good. The concepts, the were really, really good. If you've ever studied anything like strengths finders or personality profiles like DISC or something of that nature, you understand how critical it is when you're dealing with a team to understand who they are. What are their proclivities? What are their ways of communicating? What are their love languages? What's important to them? What style of both learning and teaching? And in this book, The 6 Types of Genius, he talks about all of those aspects, but he uses 80% of the book as an allegory. And in this allegory, he tells a story about a day when there was a conflict in the company and everybody had to work through this conflict, and how their conflict resolution process became a process of understanding, well, so-and-so's in the wrong job, and this person's not even doing the thing that really lights them up. They're doing something they hate to do, and at the same time, deep down inside, they're resentful that so-and-so gets that they would love to do. Ironically, the two people had been hired for the other person's job because that's what they had done in the past. Nobody had ever asked, would you be better suited? Would you be more inclined? Would you have more fun doing that person's job? Well, who thinks that? 80% of the book is built around the allegory, and it makes the entire learning process seem like we're just following this group of people in the day in the life of. The story transfers some very important and very powerful understanding of human psychology and human relationships. Now, normally a 200-page book like that would take me maybe a week or two to read. I read it in like 4 days, cover to cover. Why? Well, because number one, I love studying about people, and so that was a great hook, if you will. It was a desirable content for me. But the allegory itself, the story, compressed the time, compressed the learning, compressed the knowledge. I'm sure you could go get a degree in the personalities of humans and, 3, 4, 5 years from now have the same amount of information that you could learn in that book. But the reason the book is so powerful is because it compresses your time. That's what a mentor does. That's what a leader does. That's what stories do. It compresses time. In the story, you can see illustrations and allegories. I heard someone just this weekend use an illustration. I probably would have gone much deeper into it, but I think the audience was sharp enough to catch the allegory, the illustration. When she said, I was driving through town the other day and I saw this giant billboard that said, Houston this way. She said, if I wasn't from around here, or I hadn't spent a lot of time in metropolitan areas fighting the traffic, say, Houston this way, I might have not realized that beyond that sign, once I take the exit, there's 3 more exits to actually put me on the exact highway that would take me from here to Houston. And from there, it's still 293. Now, she stopped there, and I thought, wow, what a beautiful reference point, though. We look at the things in our life, and we think about the visions that we establish, the goals that we set for ourselves for the year, for the week, for the month. And we think, I want to get to 7 figures a month in income. I want to get to a new business developed every year. I want to get to acquiring or building or whatever it is. And to get there, I realize I don't step out the door and boom, I'm there, but I step out the door and I begin the journey in the direction of this place that I want to go. And in the same way that the billboard sign did not mean that when you make this exit, you arrive in Houston on the other side of this sign. It meant you'll never get to Houston if you don't take this exit and start that direction now. The power of a story saves time. It begins you on the way. It points you in the direction of. Now, stories can also save money because time is money. Money is time. There's a direct relationship. The more time you're wasting trying to explain something, the more money goes out the window, the more lost opportunity. But maybe you've been in that scenario where you're trying to explain a project to a would-be client. And as you're explaining it to them, they're like, oh, well, just do it however works best for you. And you're thinking to yourself, it's obvious to me they don't have any concept of what easiest for me looks like, number one. Or number two, they don't understand how many different variables go into making this job right. And if I don't know what your desire is for your end outcome, we could do this job 6 different ways, meaning we could easily do it 6 times and cost you all the money of redoing it each time because we didn't do it right the first time. Not that it's not right, it's just not what you wanted. If you've ever had a project done, I had a guy come out the other day and give me an estimate for laying a driveway. Asked him was how much to pay for the driveway. So he got his measuring tools out and he started looking at it. And as we stood there conversing, I said, so tell me about the process. What does it look like? And he said, well, first we're going to come out and dig it to level. Then we're going to lower it here and here and here and here. And then we're going to bring in this road base and we're going to press that in with our steamroller. And then we're going to bring in some cement and we're going to press that in. Then we'll lay the asphalt over the top of that. You're looking at 10 grand. And I'm like, whoa, no, that's not the kind of project I had in mind. I thought, it's just a little dirt driveway now. Let's load a rock in it and level it out. He said, well, I could do that. It cost about $1,200. Okay, why didn't we start? He said, well, because it's not the right solution. Does your wife ever wear heels? Well, not very often. He said, but if she gets out of the car in heels and steps in that road base, her heels are going to go right through it. That won't happen if we asphalt. It'll be a proper driveway. It'll also prevent more water and puddling when it rains heavy again. And so, it's the right way to do it is to spend this amount of money. Now, I don't know if you've ever had one of those projects where you do it the cheap way and then you do it the cheap way again and then you do it the cheap way again and then you do it the cheap way the 4th, 5th, or 6th time because money and in the end you spent more money than you would if you'd done it right the first time. Look, we do audio-visual events on a regular basis. I think we did over 100 last year. When you think about the number of times somebody has come to me and said, well, I just want a really simple something like this. And they're thinking with their budget brain, not with their practicality brain. Because when I get there and I tell them, we've relocated our offices and our warehouse and it's now an hour and a half from the main part of where we are, I'm glad to go back and get something, but if we start at 5, back at 7, you're not going to be happy. So in order for me to make sure that I provide the equipment that you want, let's not think budget brain first. Let's think ideal scenario. And then maybe I can find some ways to get to that result without costing you the full amount, without costing you everything that it would have cost you up front. Maybe there's some shortcuts, maybe there's some bypasses, maybe there's some ways that I can save you money. But if you call another competitor and say, this is the perfect scenario, chances are you're going to have a 4 or 5 digit price. All right. Stories save time. Stories, many times I've used stories to explain to a customer how the idea they have in mind is not going to get the ideal result. The idea they have in mind sounds good to them on paper, but it's like the drawing of a bumblebee or a helicopter. On paper, it doesn't work. But when we put it into practice, we have a whole different thing. Stories save time. Stories save money. But just like in my marriage, stories can also save relationships. Stories can save relationships on the street. Stories can save relationships in the grocery store, between parents and children, between professors and students, around the world. When I was in the Congo, I remember hearing the story that a war was started between 2 African nations because the king of one nation, or the president of that nation, had visited Kinshasa. I've been in Kinshasa. That is a very large city. It's a city whose geographic footprint is about the size of Earth, which holds 4.5 to 6 million people. But right now, Kinshasa has almost 12 million, and it's growing every day. And there are refugees from all over the nation who have been run out of their homes, and they run as far as they can. They reach the Congo River, and they can't go any further, and so they all build up right there in Kinshasa. It is like New York City of a melting pot of people from all different types of tribes and tongues. It's also got some of the most unusual driving habits I've ever seen. Intersections with no lights, no stop signs, no roundabouts, people weaving in and out. If you've ever seen the videos of India and Bombay and some of these other places where cars are flying across traffic and you don't know which way is going next. And in one of those moments, one of those flying across traffic moments, the president of another nation was in Kinshasa and involved in a car accident. And in that car accident, he was injured. And the result of that was that someone else was shot to death over the car accident. You might call it road rage. And that tipped off a war over a car accident because people lost. I don't know if you've ever been in a road rage incident. I'm guessing at some point you've been at least close. You've seen them happening. You've seen people slam on the brakes on the highway because somebody cut off somebody 5 miles ago. It happens. It's happened to me. But the stories that we tell about the relationships that we have, they can become advice. They can become warning signs. They can become illustrations of forgiveness. They can be demonstrations of handling things right. Leaders should be equipped to recognize the story that fits the moment. Not just the story they like to tell. Not just the story that's entertaining to them. Not just the story that gets a lot of applause when they tell it, but the story that's relevant to the moment, that's going to lead to a conclusion, that's going to save time, save money, save lives, save relationships. When you can identify those stories, when you become adept at recognizing, I see the characters in this moment, I realize what the real friction is, and I realize I've been here before. And I know how we got through this without a war. I know how we get through this now. This illustration, example of it working out well, could benefit everybody. And sometimes of it not working out well is just as beneficial. The ability to say, we tried it like that, it was a disaster. Let me recommend something a little different. All of these are opportunities that will sharpen your skill as a leader. Practicing those stories when nobody's around and make sure they sound right and they come out of your mouth right, well, that's highly recommended. Something may come to mind in the moment, the heat of the moment, the passion of the moment, and you feel like, I just got to share this. And then you start telling it and you realize that didn't sound as good when it came out of my mouth as it did in my head. Well, the reason that's true is because you've never practiced it coming out of your mouth before. You've never actually heard yourself saying those words. You've never thought through. And it's powerful to be spontaneous. It's even better to be prepared to be spontaneous. If you prepare yourself to be spontaneous, you'll be even more impactful when you're spontaneous. That's like the guy who says, I could pick up a car in a parking lot. He goes out there to do it and hurts himself. Well, if he's been picking up cars in the parking lot for 5 years, picking up the next one is not going to be that big a deal. Picking up the first one when everybody's watching, that can be embarrassing. Like the guy who hasn't done the jumping, flying splits in 5 years, tries to do it and rips his pants down the middle, and everybody puts him on fail army. A lot of people make decisions in life that way, and a lot of people do things they haven't practiced in front of a crowd. If you're using stories to save time, to save money, and to save relationships, use stories you've rehearsed before. Use stories that you've practiced. It's going to make all the difference in the world in the quality of your story and the quality of the time, money, and relationship savings that you employ. I challenge you to find those stories. Listen for moments and go, I have a story that would fit that. But before you share it in the crowd, rehearse it. Put your phone up, record yourself, and then ask yourself, did that come off the way I heard it in my head? If you'll take the time to do that, you will have the power to use stories to save time, to save money, and save relationships. I'm J Loren Norris with Leading Leaders Podcast for Tell It Like It Is TV. Have a blessed day.
Loren is a master teacher on storytelling, and I learned so much. I'm really going to have to sit down and go back through everything, and I think I might have to have some more coffees with Loren, but it was totally worth my time, and I really highly recommend it if you're looking to grow your ministry, grow your business, grow your career. Loren will serve you well.